Clark Bourne lived at the very edge of town where the grass stopped growing and the dust came to stay. His home was a crooked trailer with rusty steps and a roof that sometimes leaked when the rain came hard. But inside, it smelled like warm bread and vanilla thanks to his mom, Joanne, who ran a little bakery down the road. Every morning before the sun had the strength to shine, Clark got up quietly, brushed his teeth in cold water, and helped his mom mix dough. They worked in silence mostly, with only the sound of the wooden spoon scraping against the bowl and the soft hum of an old radio in the corner. The music that came from it felt like magic, soft and kind, like a secret being told. Clark was 12, small for his age, with sandy hair that curled at the ends and eyes the color of old copper pennies. His clothes were hand-me-downs from the donation bin at the church, and his shoes had holes where the toes should be. At school, he was easy to miss. Just a quiet kid from the trailer park with nothing special to say. Except when he sang. But nobody knew that part. He never told anyone how he sang to himself when he walked to school, keeping rhythm with the crunch of gravel under his shoes. Or how, at night, he sang softly while washing dishes, pretending he was on a big stage, singing to thousands of people who actually cared. Only his mom knew. She said his voice was like honey and river water. She said when he sang, she forgot the bills, the broken car, the pain in her knees. Clark didn't believe her, not really. Moms had to say stuff like that. It was part of the job. School was a different world. Cold, bright, and loud. The other kids wore new sneakers and talked about their smartphones and summer trips to Disneyland. Clark kept his head down. The only time people noticed him was when they laughed. "Hey, Trash Park Boy," someone yelled one day in the cafeteria. It was Nate Burney, tall and mean with a face like a hawk. "Did your shirt come from the dump?" Laughter broke out. Clark just stared at his tray, pretending the mashed potatoes were interesting. He didn't fight back. He never did. Then came the announcement. Over the loudspeaker, Principal Dewey's voice crackled, "Next week is Talent Week. Sign-up sheet is outside the office. All grades welcome." The cafeteria buzzed. Kids started planning dances, jokes, magic tricks. Clark didn't say a word. But later, on his way out of school, he stopped by the office. The sign-up sheet hung on the wall like a dare. He stared at it. Names were already there. Emma Daniels was doing ballet. Jared would tell jokes. Nate Burney was planning a rap battle. Clark looked down at his hands. They were still dusted with flour from the morning. His heart beat too fast. He didn't know what made him do it, but suddenly he picked up the pen. In shaky letters, he wrote, "Clark Bourne, singing Scarborough Fair." Then he walked away before he could change his mind. The next day, everything changed. Someone had taken a picture of the sign-up sheet and posted it to the school's group chat. Clark's name was circled in red with a comment underneath. "LOL. Can't wait for Trash Boys concert." By lunch, kids were making jokes in the hallway. They cupped their hands around their mouths and mimicked him singing in slow, fake voices. "Are you going to cry into your microphone?" Nate asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe you'll sing about dirt and sadness." Clark didn't answer. He just kept walking. Inside, he felt something cracking but not breaking. Not yet. That night, he sat on the back step of the trailer while his mom washed dishes inside. The stars were out, scattered and lonely. He sang softly to himself, barely above a whisper. "Are you going to Scarborough Fair? Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme." He stopped when he heard the door open. "You're still singing that old song?" Joanne asked, drying her hands with a towel. "Your grandma used to sing that when I was little." Clark nodded. "It feels safe." She sat beside him and looked up at the stars. "You really going to sing it at school?" He shrugged. "Some of those kids are mean," she said gently. "But I think you should do it anyway. Not because of them. Because it matters to you." Clark didn't answer. But something inside him felt warm. The night before the show, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing the laughter in his head. But under that, he heard something else. His mom's voice, soft and true. The next day came like a storm. The auditorium was packed. Students filled the folding chairs, whispering and giggling. The lights were too bright. The stage looked big and scary. Clark waited backstage, holding the mic with both hands. His name was called. Next up, Clark Bourne, singing Scarborough Fair. Laughter rippled through the crowd. He stepped out, small and quiet, his shoes making no sound on the wood. The lights hit his face. He couldn't see anyone. Just shadows. Whispers. A cough. The piano started. Soft and slow. Clark closed his eyes. He thought of his mom kneading dough in the morning light, of stars above the trailer, of dust and bread and honey and hope. He opened his mouth. Are you going to Scarborough Fair? The room grew still. Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. No one laughed. No one whispered. Clark's voice floated like smoke, pure and trembling. Not perfect, but full of something real, like an old dream waking up. By the time he sang the last line, you could hear the breath in the room. A girl in the front row had tears in her eyes. Even Nate Burney sat frozen. Clark stood in silence. Then, applause. Not loud, not crazy, but slow, steady, real. He didn't smile. He just nodded, handed the mic to the teacher, and walked off the stage. Backstage, his knees shook. He leaned against the wall, heart pounding. And then a voice behind him. That was something special. Clark turned. A tall man in a gray coat stood there, holding a notebook. His eyes were kind. I'm Richard Phillips, he said. I work with the City Children's Choir. Would you be willing to talk to me about an audition? Clark stared at him, wide-eyed. Then he nodded. After the talent show, the school felt quieter. People still talked, but not in the same way. They didn't laugh at Clark anymore, not out loud at least. Some of the kids looked at him like he was a stranger now, like they hadn't noticed he was there all along. Others avoided his eyes. He didn't mind. Something had changed. Something big. The man from backstage, Richard Phillips, had given Clark a card with gold writing. It said, City Children's Choir, Talent Outreach Program. On the back, there was an address, a time, and a note, audition this Saturday. Bring nothing but your voice? Clark showed the card to his mom that night. She didn't say anything at first. Just stared at it, her lips trembling. Then she hugged him tight. You're going to do great, she whispered. He didn't feel great. He felt scared. The next few days passed in a blur. At school, teachers smiled at him more. Mrs. Rayner, the music teacher, asked if she could play a recording of his performance for the younger students. Clark nodded, even though it made his stomach flutter. Nate didn't say much, just narrowed his eyes when Clark passed in the hallway. But the jokes had stopped, at least for now. Saturday came fast. Joanne drove Clark to the city in their old station wagon. The engine wheezed and the radio didn't work anymore, but Clark didn't need music. It was already humming inside him, soft and nervous. The audition building was huge, glass and silver, with tall windows and soft music playing in the lobby. It smelled like fresh paper and new carpets. Clark felt out of place right away. Kids in perfect clothes and shiny shoes waited in the hallway. Some wore scarves around their necks. Others stretched their mouths like they were getting ready for a big race. They whispered about vibrato and pitch and breath support. Clark looked down at his scuffed shoes. He tried not to touch anything. Then a door opened. Clark Bourne, a woman called. He stood up, hands cold. Joanne squeezed his shoulder. You got this, baby. Inside the room, there was a black piano, 3 adults with pens and clipboards, and Richard Phillips, smiling gently. Hi, Clark, Richard said. Nice to see you again. Whenever you're ready. Clark swallowed. The room was quiet. Too quiet. He closed his eyes. He thought of flour, of cold mornings and warm bread, of his mother humming in the kitchen. He remembered the stage, the light, the moment no one laughed. He began to sing. It wasn't perfect. His voice cracked a little near the end. But he didn't stop. He let the feelings come out, loneliness, hope, fear, and something deeper. Something that had no name. When he finished, he didn't dare open his eyes. Then Richard spoke. That was honest, he said. And that matters more than perfect. Clark looked up. One of the women was writing quickly. The man beside her was nodding. You have a gift, Richard said. It's rare. It's raw. And it's real. Clark didn't know what to say. He just blinked. Richard smiled. You're in the summer scholarship program at Emerson School of Music. We'll send all the paperwork. Joanne, you'll get a call this week. Joanne let out a breath like she'd been holding it for years. Thank you, she whispered. They rode home in silence. Clark watched the fields roll by outside the window, wondering if he was still dreaming. The next week was strange. People called. Papers arrived in the mail. There was a packet with the school logo, instructions, even a list of things to pack. Joanne cried while reading it. Clark didn't. He just sat on the couch, holding the paper, feeling like the world had grown 10 times bigger overnight. Summer came hot and quick. Clark packed one small bag with jeans, t-shirts, and a toothbrush. Joanne gave him a notebook and a pencil and kissed his forehead before he got on the bus to Austin. Write it all down, she said. The music. The feelings. Everything. He nodded, too nervous to speak. Emerson was a dream and a storm. The buildings were tall, covered in vines, and smelled like old books and polished wood. Kids played violins in the hallways. There were pianos in every room. Some students spoke in other languages. Others carried sheet music like it was treasure. Clark felt small again. Invisible. The classes were fast and full of words he didn't understand: dynamics, articulation, phrasing. The other kids had been trained since they were little. They read music like it was a second language. They could sing scales and match pitch and warm up like pros. Clark didn't even know what a scale was. He tried to follow. He listened hard. He stayed up late with his notebook, writing down everything he heard. But still, he felt behind. Always behind. One night, after a long day of vocal drills and music history, he sat outside the dorm, feeling heavy. He missed his mom. He missed the bakery. He missed being able to sing without thinking. Then he heard footsteps. It was Richard. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. Clark shook his head. "You're struggling," Richard said. "I can see it." Clark looked down. "I don't belong here." "That's not true," Richard said. "You belong more than most." Clark didn't answer. Richard waited. Then he said, "Do you know what makes a great singer?" Clark shook his head. "It's not high notes or perfect breath. It's truth. You sing with truth, Clark. That can't be taught. The rest will come." Clark nodded slowly. "I don't want you to try to be like them," Richard said. "I want you to be you." That's what moved that room. Those words stayed with Clark. He started to sing more often, not to impress, but to feel. He sang in the stairwell when no one was around. He sang in the showers. He sang to the trees in the courtyard. Slowly, the teachers noticed. Miss Arden, the performance coach, asked him to sing for the class. He did. A soft song his mom used to hum when she was tired. When he finished, she wiped her eyes. "That," she said, "is music." The final showcase was announced 2 weeks before the end of the program. Everyone had to perform one song in front of a live audience: parents, teachers, city artists. It was the biggest moment of the summer. Kids started preparing fancy pieces: opera, Broadway solos, choral works in Latin. Clark had nothing. He tried to pick something big, something impressive. But every time he practiced, it felt wrong. Empty. Then, late one night, he sat on his bed and wrote the words in his notebook. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." It was simple. It was small. But it was true. He circled it. That would be his song. The others laughed when they found out. "You're doing a lullaby?" one boy asked. "Seriously. You'll get eaten alive," said a girl with perfect pitch. Clark didn't care. Not this time. He practiced every day. Not for power. Not for notes. For heart. And when the final day came, he stood backstage, holding his mic, just like before. Only now he wasn't the same boy. He closed his eyes. Thought of the trailer. The stars. The bakery. The dust. His mother's arms. He took a deep breath. And stepped out. The stage lights at Emerson weren't like the ones back home. They were colder, brighter, and sharper. The room was packed: parents in suits, teachers in heels, even reporters with cameras. Clark could hear whispers, the kind that didn't stop when someone walked in. But he had heard worse. He stood still at center stage, holding the mic like a lifeline. His name had just been called. The boy from the trailer park. The one who dared to choose a lullaby. Somewhere in the front row sat Richard Phillips. Next to him, a seat saved for Joan Bourne, empty. She couldn't come. The bakery had no one else to run it, and gas money barely got them to Austin once a month. But she told Clark the most important thing before he left that morning. "Sing like I'm right there next to you. Because I always am." He took a breath. The lights dimmed. He began. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The first line came out soft. Honest. It didn't try to impress. It just spoke. "You make me happy when skies are gray." The room was quiet. So quiet, you could hear a shoe scrape from the back row. Clark kept going, eyes closed. He didn't think about breath support or posture. He thought about mornings mixing dough. About cold walks to school. About his mom's cracked hands and warm voice. About the first time someone believed in him. "You'll never know, dear, how much I love you." His voice caught. Just a little. But he kept going. "Please don't take my sunshine away." Silence. Clark stood still. The final note floated in the air like smoke and then was gone. No one moved. And then, slow like before, it began. Clap, clap, clap. Then more. Clapping. Cheering. Standing. A teacher wiped her eyes. A boy in the back shouted. That was real. Clark felt warm all over. Not from the lights. from something deeper. Richard met him backstage, smiling wide. You did it, Clark. Clark shook his head, almost in disbelief. I just sang. That's exactly why it worked, Richard said. 2 days later, a letter arrived. It had the school's seal and a gold ribbon. Congratulations, Clark Born. You have been accepted into the full-year program at Emerson School of Music on full scholarship. Clark held the paper in his lap the whole drive home. When he stepped off the bus back in Leach, Texas, Joanne was waiting in the dust, apron covered in flour. Her eyes were wide, already shining. Well, she asked. Clark didn't say anything. He just ran to her and hugged her tight. They stood like that for a long time. That night, Clark sat on the back steps again, notebook in hand. The stars were out. The wind was soft. He opened the notebook and wrote. I sang the smallest song, and the world heard me. He didn't stop singing after that. Years passed. Clark Born grew taller, stronger, and bolder. He studied hard, wrote songs, learned the piano, even taught himself guitar. His voice deepened but never lost its warmth. He sang in cities, on stages, in front of crowds that clapped before he even opened his mouth. He wrote albums filled with stories about childhood, about truth, about things lost and found in the dust. People called him a star. But Clark never forgot. He never forgot the cold mornings, the bakery, the mean kids at school. He never forgot Richard's voice telling him to sing the truth. He never forgot his mom's lullaby. At every concert, no matter how big, he ended the night the same way. He'd take a breath, strum the first chord, and sing. You were my sunshine, my only sunshine. And the whole room would go still, just like that first time. Because sometimes it only takes one voice, one song, to quiet the world. And Clark Born, the poor boy from the edge of town, knew exactly how to sing it. Moral of the story. True talent is not measured by where you come from, how you look, or how much you own. What matters is the honesty and heart you pour into what you love. When you stay true to yourself and dare to share your gift, even the smallest song can quiet a room and change your life and the lives of everyone who hears it. Thank you for inviting me to bring Clark Born's journey to life. I loved weaving his courage, his mother's faith, and that simple lullaby into a story that shows how authenticity can outshine every obstacle. I hope it inspires you and any readers never to hide their own sunshine.